Three, two, one. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Hello, Natasha.
Hi, John. Hello, everybody.
Hi, welcome to our Mindful Leadership podcast. And today we're going to talk about quite a broad subject of what happens when things go wrong. And I'm sure we've both got lots of examples in our lives to share, and some of the experiences that we've had from our many wonderful clients without, of course, divulging any personal information about them. And yeah, we'd love to talk about, especially this time of year, there's always a lot going on in the world, but also it's a time when people are reflecting on like their progress in their life. There's people struggling to either keep their jobs and feel secure in their jobs, or they might even be losing their jobs around this time of year. And you might also have a New Year's resolution. You're thinking, I'm going to give it to the end of the year, and then next year I'm going to do something. So we'll definitely cover a wide range of subjects, including our lives, our jobs, our businesses, our families, and yeah, let's get started, Natasha. I feel like I get the honor of asking you the really challenging question of,
Wow.
so tell me, Natasha, could tell me about a time when things went really wrong for you?
It's so interesting. Like, I'm Portuguese as well, and we have a saying that sometimes bad things happen so that better ones can come along.
Yay.
Yeah, and it can be so challenging when we are going through what we deem as something bad is happening because it feels uncomfortable. I find this in many scenarios, and looking back in my life, I can see the hindsight of things going awry. So even the change of career, if you look at it, like when I went through my burnout and I had a workplace bully, that I allowed, that I'd never had that going throughout high school. We had zero tolerance in South Africa for things like that when I was growing up. And it was so interesting going through that. It started to affect my health. And I had just moved from Scotland to Canada, and I was like, so kind of like my perception at that time, I was like, this is where my career's come to die, after being in the beautiful tech industry where we were always at the forefront of technology. And, in my last company, I were running teams in Europe and in Scotland and traveling down to London every 2 weeks to, meet with a PR company and all of this. And then I ended up getting to where I landed, and very much oil and gas industry. And at that time, the thought process was, well, you don't have oil and gas industry. So, I mean, experience. So I was just like, too bad for you. It sucks to be you. And it was quite interesting where the word marketing was used very, very differently over there. So I actually had to go from that to interning, which was really, really good for my ego. Took a bit of a bashing, but I'd always thrown my hand at things like that. And then started hitting like a bit of kind of like, made my way back up again, but started hitting a bit of burnout. And I had this person who I faced it was quite difficult to move through that time. And just so that there was an awareness that I think within a week, three of us from that department eventually gave in our notice within the same week of a
Wow.
department of five. So it was quite an interesting time, and then my health just went. I broke my leg in five places, with clearly not wanting to continue on in that direction
Yeah.
leading up to that. But absolutely loved what I did at the same time. So broke my leg, had to go through all of this, and I was like, what is going on, right? And I said to, like, my husband, I was like, at the time, I was like, if I don't do something with my health, something's going to be up, right? So I ended up really digging deep into my health, and looking at that, and that felt like it was really, really bad. Like, this is my story I was telling myself, is this is where my career has come to die. I was so Sagittarianly dramatic in all of this. And, I can't, I find it really, really hard. Like, kids were young as well. And there was just so much that was my health, like friends and culture and everything, and learning how to connect to that. And it was probably one of my lowest points, I think, in my life, because all of that judgment that comes in at that time, that not good enough, that, what's wrong with you? And my brain just wasn't functioning as well as it could. And I'm dyslexic as well. So when I get stressed, that seems to amp up. In, in
Mhm.
in that, so it was just like, what's the matter with me? Like, what's going on? There was just that whole that judgment and stuff. And I was
Yeah.
like, but in hindsight, I dove into my healing. I dove into what's going on. And fast forward, I am so grateful for going through that. So grateful. Not only did I understand now that, yes, that was where that career went to die, but it birthed another beautiful opportunity to really start being of service in a different way. It really did birth that healing aspect that, when we heal for ourselves, we heal generations before us and the generations that are here and those that are here to come. It's like it absolutely gave me an opportunity to reinvent who I was, who I wanted to be. It's almost like it created a new life for that. That they came out of that. And what I started to learn afterwards, and this is pretty hard when you're going through this, is why did I draw the situation to me? Why did I create this? Because ultimately, we create our environment.
Yeah.
We create these situations. I created that bloody broken leg in 5 places, right? Like, I created all of that subconsciously because that was signs that I needed to be pulled in a different direction. And
Mhm.
there's so many different ways that I could have at that point gone and just been like, okay, this is it. I'm sitting in this doom, or it could have been that, okay, no, I'm going to try. And I tried to go back into what I was doing before and I just couldn't. It just turned my stomach every time I thought of it. Not only that,
Yeah.
a lot of the jobs that I applied for, some of them were like, word for word, I had everything. And then there was the weird stuff that would happen, right?
Mhm.
Like I'd be sitting in the lobby of this big tower company, and the security guard didn't tell the person that I was here for my final interview. And I sat in the lobby for half an hour for my interview. And then they came back and said, well, you were late. And I was like, uh, what? And they were like, yeah, we're
Wow.
not putting up with that. And I was like, what happened? But in hindsight, I am so grateful that that happened. I'm so grateful that there was a miscommunication between me and the security person or the security person and upstairs or whatever happened, because
Yeah.
I wouldn't be sitting here right now having this conversation with you,
Yeah.
having this beautiful life that is quite flexible to bring in that balance that I wanted to create with work and life, and realizing who I am and this
Yeah.
and being of service in this way. So that's one of my
Wow.
experiences, one of the big turning points in my life. How about you, John?
I, I don't think. Okay. So first of all, thank you for sharing. It's a lot, and what a great example. And I love that your body was like such a big part of that journey. Of course, no one would wish you know a broken leg in 5 different places upon you or anyone, but at the same time, your body was clearly like, "Hey, me, like I know you think a lot, but we need to feel and remember that we're all a team together, and this all has to happen together." And clearly, like your body had got more of a say in things after that event, after the kind of mutiny, because then it was saying like churning and causing like stomach problems when you're thinking of like, oh, I think I might go back to the same thing again. Like, no, no, no. So
You're
yeah,
not.
thank you for sharing. I've never shared this with many people, and here I am on a podcast. I think only maybe my wife I've shared this with. Um, so I found myself stood in an office of a small company um, when I was about 38, 39, and crying, stood there crying in front of the owner. And the tears were like sadness and rage and like, what have I done to myself? What have I done to my career? And And I was just shocked. I was shocked at the extent of the situation that I put myself in. And really simply, the previous sort of my career path up until that point and my previous role was very much about chasing job titles and money and, you know, span of control. And I want a bigger house and a bigger car. And there was a part of me felt that that was, you know, going to make me happy.
Mhm.
And some of that was a little bit desperate. Like I was a lot of unhappy in a lot of areas of my life. And I just felt like, well, I can make this one thing work. And so it's almost like everything hinges on Jon's career. And and I left my company prior to that uh, as a chief technical officer, really chasing money, which felt so like I look back and I was just thinking as you're talking about some of those conversations, they feel quite ugly conversations I was having with my manager when it was just about money. When I think when you end up in a conversation just about that,
Mhm.
you know it's a good time to check on why you're really there. Like why do you really want to be doing that work? So I went to this small company. It was a startup, and things were, you know, there were loads of warning signs from early on. But I found myself in a situation where I wasn't valued. I was
Mhm.
almost like a figurehead. It's like, let's hire Jon and then wheel him into like meetings with big important customers. And then, but I was never almost given no authority or no control over what was going on. And yeah, I was totally accountable. And things just, it took a number of months and they just unraveled month after month until eventually there was this um, over, overall over all the things in the world. It was a discussion, a heated discussion about whether we'd agreed on some additional funding for how do you describe it? Like it was like food after work, and for the teams. And at that point, I realized that I was in the wrong place. That I was not only in the wrong place, this was really destructive for me, and that it had been for the last 6 7 months. And I I needed to go, and I needed to go like then. I needed to go like right now, Jon. Um, and so yeah, the next, I think as it turned out, after I dried my tears and walked off, and ended up paying the bill myself for the food. And you know, acknowledging that was like a totally broken situation that I was never going to put myself in again. I ended up going. I did, ironically, did some. I had to go on a trip to the US, so I went over, came back and resigned, and then I had to work my notice, which was about 2 3 months, and it was just this like it felt like a shredding of my ego. I'd become so entitled. I was like, me. I'm Jon Binnie. I need, you know, I need a big salary and a big fancy job title. I need to manage lots of people, and I'm entitled to that. And when I'd been through that, what was a massive dressing down from the universe saying, "Hey, we've got the perfect solution for you, Jon. Come work here." When I went through that, I was like, I just felt destroyed. I felt like I was, you know, the previous 20 odd years, or almost 20 years in software was almost like it had come to nothing, and that I'd wasted my time and wasted so much of my life. Yes, I'd managed to earn lots of money, but it wasn't making me happy, and I was going in the wrong direction. But and very briefly, just after I left that job, I was unemployed for not very long, for just a few weeks, but it felt like it might be quite a long time. And when I just before I joined Amazon, I I was in this situation where like I was asking them about the different teams I could join, and they spoke about this team. The team was just 4 people, and I was like, I'd just gone from the company prior at just over managing over 70 people to a smaller team in the less pleasant company, and then into Amazon. I started with 4 people, and I was like, this is amazing. I'm getting the opportunity to like rebuild that, to rebuild myself, and that was exactly it. And of course, I did still carry many patterns still. Like I wanted to still empire build. There was clearly part of me that wants to do that. But a lot of the ego had gone, a lot of the entitlement. I became just, it felt like, even though I was at a huge company at Amazon, I felt like I was in startup mode. I was like, I'll do anything. Like, if you need me to code, I'll code. If you need me to do this, I'll do that. Like, whatever it is for the customer, I'll do it. And it felt lovely. And it felt really, I felt really close to the team members as well. And so that just felt like a fantastic rebirthing. And in hindsight as well, okay, it took another 8 years after that, but also to leave that industry, like I was not ready to leave the industry just because I'd broken myself in one company for a few months. I needed to, in many respects, I needed to find what actually makes me happy before I could decide to leave. Otherwise, I'd just be lost. So yeah,
Yeah.
there I was, drying my tears, not realizing that this was probably the best thing that ever happened to me.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. That takes a lot of courage to share that, Jon, for sure. And I think a lot of us feel that way. We are in that brink of like tears of sadness and frustration. And I think it's like what I felt when you were saying that is that the injustice that is there,
Mhm.
right? And what also came to me is kind of like the the arguing for money a lot of the times is arguing for our value that
Yeah,
is there as well, right? And it's very interesting because value is such a so I was talking to a client of mine the other day, and they're completely undervalued by their employer, but they're undervalued themselves, which kind of like allows that and calls that forward,
yeah,
which is so interesting. So I love that both of us went through a bit of a an ego bashing to
yeah.
be
That's
able to
right.
be like, hello, wake up, it's like it's great. But I found that when working with this client of mine and trying to find that self-esteem again and that self-worth,
Mhm.
um, and we're still seeing the health issues that are coming in. That
Yeah,
burnout is there, and it's kind of like, okay, how do we move through that, receiving that self-worth and that self-value that is there? Where do we activate that within ourselves? Because I feel that that is a lot of the times we know it, but we don't feel it, right? We know it up here
yeah,
logically, but we don't believe it in here in order to allow us to have that courage to step forward until our body goes, okay, you're sitting down,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
a lot of the times you argued for it. You were like, this is me, this is what I'm worth, this is what I'm changing for, like this is what I'm, going through, this is what I'm striving for. Whereas other people are like, I don't see that value within myself.
yeah,
I'm not even going to ask for it until I drop, have a heart attack at my desk at work, or whatever it may be.
yeah,
So the values, I start looking at, okay, value of the employer to the employee about themselves and into the clients. Because like a lot of the times we look at it when somebody leaves, a lot of the times companies will counter offer. And it's like, it's too late by then.
That's it.
You
It's
haven't seen the
way too
value
late.
until then. It's way too late. People leave managers, they don't leave, jobs. Like it's like it's way too late. So what is it within the corporate culture, within our own culture that we don't see the value until it's too late? And that
Yeah,
it falls into relationships as well.
yeah,
Friendships, all of that. So like where does that come in? And the great things about these bad things happen is because it brings us our attention to actually getting curious and really digging deep into, okay, what is the value of this? What is the self-esteem? Where am I valued? Where am I not valued? From all directions, right?
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. I
You've met a
agree.
lot of people.
It and it's beyond business, but I think in business we feel this kind of broken aspect of our culture and our monetary systems in particular, with this lack of useful measure of value. Like, it just doesn't really exist. And money as a proxy is terrible. It's just so bad. And yet, yeah, we seem to find ourselves in situations where, you can be waiting on that promotion for 20 years, and over that 20 years realize that you start to believe that it is because of you, that it's your fault that your company hasn't promoted you, even though likely in 20 years you probably be already doing that job and maybe more, and you're certainly capable of doing whatever that promotion is. And so when the company decides that is just overlooking you for whatever reason, and it could be bias, it could be, oh, you've been here too long, and you're like, what does that mean? And then you just say to yourself, okay, well, that's my fault. You lower your currency, you lower your value, and you say, well, I'm not good enough because even though I've worked 20 years, I'm never going to get that promotion, and I'm unhappy with my company because they never helped me enough, or told me that I wasn't valued enough, and I'm telling myself continually that I'm not valued enough. And those situations, I mean, I had, in my software engineering career, I had like over 10 companies. So I just moved. My pattern was, if I don't feel valued, I'm off. And I just left. And it was like, looking back, sometimes it was just because I'd hit like the kind of what I perceived as my like curve. I'd hit maybe 1 or 2 years, and I was like, I kind of know how to do this job pretty well now. But I'd seem to end up arguing a lot with the senior managers or whatever, or the owners, and they're just not really listening, and they don't really value my opinion. So I'll just go and find somewhere that does. And anyway, I can probably earn more money somewhere else. But like when we buy things from each other, like if we, buy, a phone, or, bread or water or milk or whatever that we're purchasing from each other, the perceived value, the perception of value, or the feeling of value is largely really wrong. Like, it doesn't really help you. If you're literally on your deathbed because you don't have any water, in Scotland anyway, you can, if you have access to a tap, like it's largely free, or included in your rates and unmetered, and that it would literally save your life. And if you were a billionaire, you would pay £1 billion to save your life to drink that cup of water, and yet it's free notionally. And some of those things just don't add up. You're like, I don't think money is a great proxy for value. And at work, I think some of the things that have astounded me since I left in employment and gone into working for myself, running my own business, is just some of these things are just really, really simple, right? Like, well, I value myself, right, every month, and when I look at my income for the month, I'm like, well, it just is. It's just a number. I don't feel any worse about myself, whether it's higher or lower. Sometimes as it's really higher, I'd be like, that's a lot of work. And if it's lower, I'd be like, okay, this is good. I get like a bit of a break maybe, and maybe I can like be thinking and reflecting and receiving more. And yet when you're in what was going to get to the really important thing of, when you buy things, like when you work for yourself, for instance, when I bought this microphone, it cost about £450 in a month where I had one of my lowest incomes. But to me, the value of it was, but I can scale. It means that if I'm in my camper van, or if I want to do like meditation recordings or podcasts or live streams, that it feels like it's the microphone I'm probably going to use for the next 20 years. So I'll just, invest in it now so that I get the full value of that. Like, why wait? Even if it's just the kind of last amount of cash I have this month. And yet when you go and work in a salaried company, people are buying stuff all the time. They're renting a new building. They're like, someone's, bought a company car, or the CEO's like taking more profit, or you've like whatever's going on. Those things are always happening, and you're largely oblivious to it. You kind of programmed to just say to yourself, that has nothing to do with how much money the company pays me. It has absolutely everything to do with the money that the company pays you. Like, if you look at the chair you're sat on, and it's a cheap chair, it costs less money, and you're sat there thinking, oh, it's not very comfy, but there's a slim chance that maybe some of that is reflected in your salary. That would be a lovely universe if it really was true. When you
Yeah.
work for yourself, you realize this, right? You're like, if I spend less, I just put more money in my personal account. And
Mhm.
yet I feel the value of spending because I can see that the kind of the future side of me thinks, yeah, there's things worth investing in because their value in the longer term is so like exponential. Like I'll be less embarrassed when I look back at 20 years of podcasts with you, Natasha, and going, at least he had a good mic. Didn't like those tops much, but he had a good mic.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, there's a lot of good points in there as well. And it actually brought me to thinking about a couple of examples. One, an example from me when I was in Cape Town, but the other example of looking at how do we build value? Because it's sometimes a lot of companies think, okay, I'm going to put in kind of like a tennis or a foosball tennis, thing
Yeah.
in there, and I'm going to kind of like, buy a meditation app and all sorts of that. But if people aren't still feeling valued, if the company culture, if people aren't, it's like a band-aid, like that is being put on top, because if people don't feel free to say, I don't agree with that, they're not being heard.
Yeah.
You've been hiring them for a position that you've hired them for their expertise, and then you're not listening. It's like it's so interesting where value comes in from that aspect, and buying the best and looking at the assets that we have, the people that work for us or with us, or because if they believe, if they value themselves, they value the company, they'll treat our business as if it's their own. And it's so interesting because I started looking at, I needed help with social media, and I I sent out this request and I got hundreds of requests back with different prices that people pay. And it comes from a lot of countries that you can bargain. And it took me back to this place where I'd been, so I went to South Africa about 7 years ago, and we went with the family because one of my brothers was getting married. And there's this beautiful market in Cape Town that I absolutely love, but it's all these African curios and it's amazing. And it's just absolutely beautiful. And I remember that there was this one guy who made this beautiful, oh, this is such a shadow part. There was this beautiful, he makes kind of like, he made these beautiful kind of like animals made out of soapstone. And I was so in that mentality of bargaining because that's what we do. And apparently I can do it really, really well. Um, So I've got another story around in Hong Kong when I was there, that I went to this market that managed to like negotiate really, really well. And at the end of the day, when I went back to go get more of like runners, the lady was like, you? No, you know, no, no, no more. She made her money for the day. She was like, I'm not bargaining with you anymore. But with this gentleman, I managed to bargain, got a really, really good deal. I felt amazing afterwards. And then it got to a stage where one of my cousins said, hey, I want to go and buy this. I need you to come and bargain with me. I need you to come and buy it for me because I want the best price for it. So I did. And literally within half an hour waiting for the bus, my stomach just went, "Mm." I was just like, my stomach's obviously a very good indicator when I'm doing stuff wrong, but I just
Yeah.
like just turned upside down and I was like, you know what, Natasha, for the $70 that you paid, you could have actually valued this guy's work a hell of a lot more, because $70 for him to take home to feed his family of four,
Hmm.
like that is gross. I was like,
Hmm.
I felt dirty, I felt gross, I felt ugh.
Yeah.
And I tried to go back because I was like, I need to give you more money because I realized that I totally undervalued him. And I
Hmm.
realized that I was perpetuating a bigger wheel of perhaps, I mean, yes, he could have had more, like he could have said, no, this is my like thing. And it would be like, okay, that's it. But that
Yeah.
drive, I was just like, oh my goodness, this is brutal. And that kind of like reminds me again, of like speaking to some of my clients where they're allowing this to happen to that because
Yeah.
they don't see the self-worth or their self-value. And when it came to looking for people to do my social media, I didn't bargain their price. I was like, this is what they're asking for. This is what they're valuing. This is what I'm going to, this, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And I choose whether I take it or not, kind of a thing, because I didn't want to bring into that, because then it also creates a little bit of resentment, or there's a little bit of like, ugh, I
Yeah.
not seeing my value, I'm not feeling my value, and then the value is lost everywhere.
Hmm.
And that was such a good lesson for me in that sense, because I won't do that. And it's also requesting my own prices,
Yeah.
my own services, is looking at, okay, what is that? Oh, my clients can't afford that, so I'm going to undervalue my services, instead of calling forward the clients that do value it, that value themselves and investing in their own health. So there's a lot
Hmm.
of things that come in with value and those situations that help us to actually see things from a different perspective.
Yeah. And I think it's incredible that, when things go wrong, often it's because we're like, there's this value disconnect. Like, we're at some point, we've said to ourselves, uh, you know, this, I need to feel more valued. I need to, and actually, no one can make you feel valued, right?
No.
You have to value yourself.
Mhm.
Give an example like, when things go wrong and you leave your company, right? So you've left, you've said, that's it, I'm out of here. And maybe you're arguing about money and they were saying no, or as often happens, they try to keep you at the last minute. But you're like, no, it's gone, like the moment's passed. So
Mhm.
there you are, and you're looking at other jobs. And of course, what do companies do? They often advertise the salary. And and it seems so bizarre because really just like your experience with the with this gentleman was that it's actually you that have the value, not the company. They don't get to tell you what your value is. You
Mhm.
get to first feel it inside of you and say, well, I have these skills and I feel these skills are of high value to, if the company, for example, is, offering healthcare for others, you might be a fantastic carer. And yes, there's a salary that goes along with that, but the value of your skills to caring for and helping others is huge. And so when you're sat there in the interview or you're on a phone call and you're saying, well, I'd like to negotiate my salary, and they say, well, this position has, it's 20,000 and you want 40,000, you don't need to like argue with them about the fact that their position has 20,000. That's lovely that they've thought of that number. But for yourself, you can say, my value is is this number, and it's this many. I want this salary and this number of hours that I work in a week. I want this work life balance. I don't want any evening phone calls. I don't want any weekends. I want to finish by 5 p.m. so that I can see my family, and this is what I know I'm worth. And I'm not. And if you try and barter on those, these are the non-negotiables.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a really quick negotiation if just one of those is a problem. And I see time and time again when people just go, oh well, your salary might get bigger like within the first couple of years. Like, don't do that, please don't do that. And it causes like such horrible problems for people because they become so obsessed about it when they join, or
Mhm.
either they feel bad about themselves for a couple of years at least, or they feel entitled and ironically underperform in the role because they're still unhappy. They're not really connected to what they're doing. And yeah, I think so much of it comes from that perceived value. And just like you say, Natasha, if you project that onto others, if you say to them, I'm going to negotiate you to, eating, rice and beans with your family for the coming months, and you feel
Yeah.
good about it because you save $5, you know,
Yeah.
that at the same time you realize I could value them. I could lead by example and say, because who wants to be that customer that is the last on the list? Oh, I pay them so little. It's like John pays me so little, so I'm going to like put his request right at the bottom. That's also a horrible feeling. And yeah, I think the value of what you create with these like with a much more human centric approach, where you're saying, okay, I'm worth this, and I know that the things that like you mentioned social media, when you know that something's harder for you to do and that it would take you a long time to learn that skill, and maybe like my design skills aren't amazing, it's like maybe, you know, I could go on some courses and stuff, but the value to me to hiring in a designer to do some of my work would be exponentially greater, and I could just go off and do one or two more client sessions, and
Mhm.
the value to me would be massive. That they could, you know, much more clearly articulate the energy of what I want to share in my in social media in particular. So yeah, I think it is so important. And you know this other phenomenon about value is that when all those things go wrong outside of you, and there's the big storm raging and this big crisis, like you've left a marriage or a partnership or a company, or you've been fired, or you've, you know, your relationship's broken up, that suddenly you're left with just yourself. You're left with like you and your heart and your self-love. And it's
Mhm.
like this, it can be really shocking because you realize this is me. I'm left with me. How do I feel? How do I feel about everything that's going on in my life? And if you've been neglecting that, if you've been neglecting your body, often that's the reason why all this is happening. It's happening for you, this big supposed disaster. Just like after I'd been crying in the office and I went back and told my wife, she was just like, first of all, she was angry about the situation. And then she was like, well, you know, you put yourself there. And it's like, I know, I know, I absolutely did. I literally left another company. It was much better to walk into that situation, and it taught me the, you know, biggest reflections of my self-worth and self-value that helped me then go into to really restarting that career for the following 8 years. And I'm so glad that did. And actually, what did it really teach me? The value of that lesson was it taught me to find work I love, and not just to chase things that have lower value to me. Like clearly money and job titles are less important.
Yeah, no, what a beautiful experience that is, and how brave it is that to actually even have that self-reflection, because a lot of people would just ignore that, right? And continue
Yeah.
on and and move through that. So that's quite an amazing thing to do. How does one build self-worth and self-value? Like when we're not seeing it,
Hmm.
right? How do we connect to that? Right. And I think we're so used to reflecting on what we've done wrong,
Yeah.
and we don't reflect on what we've done right. And yeah, I've started learning that when I realize, okay, maybe I could have done something better, or when I realize a limitation, it's almost kind of like it's one of those things where I turn around and I'm like, oh, now that I recognize it, I can
Hmm.
just change my behavior. Whereas before I used to beat myself up for it and judge
Yeah.
myself for like months and years and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
Uh, Whereas now it's like, oh my goodness, I'm so glad it's come into my awareness. How can I change my behavior? But when we're stuck in that rut of, and it's so interesting because when we're at our lowest point, we call towards us those situations that help us to reinvent who we are,
Yeah.
to rise us from. But how do we start? How does one start to look at what our self-worth is and our self-value when we're not feeling it within ourselves? Um, I know one of the processes is looking at what have you done well, reflecting on that, and what is the blessing behind everything, and looking at, okay, how is the situation actually working for me and not against me? Like if
Yeah.
we were to walk around believing that everything was conspiring to give us our best possible life, how different would it be, as in, believing that everything's out to get us? Like, how do we build that where we're like, no, I'm worthy of more?
Yeah. I think it's a fantastic question. I would say that the first thing is, when like when things go wrong, take a lot of time, more time than that you usually would, to really understand the scope, the size, scale, and scope of like what's just happened. And it's something I learned when I worked at Lloyd's Bank. Was that they were really good at building really monstrous, terrible IT systems. Like I think at one point I was on call for like 4,000 banking systems at night,
Ooh.
and you can guarantee like they would, you know, at least one of them would have problems. And there's this. amazing and many amazing people that I've worked with who would spend a lot of time just focusing on the incident response. So it'd be like, so what happened? So what really went wrong, and how broad is this impact? And I I do that now much more instinctively when things go wrong. It's like this. I now know there's a lesson in it, but what I used to do was just at least start with understanding this size, scale, and scope, because then you realize, well, how's everything, feeling like if I lost my job, like how what's my money situation like? How do I physically feel? How are my relationships? How do I feel about my self-love? Am I making this about me, or am I like really raging and upset about the company that let me go? And understanding like all the things that are happening, even like looking at your calendar and going like, what's happening next? Like, what am I doing tomorrow? Well, I don't need to go to work tomorrow. That's good news. I can like, I can do what I want tomorrow. And then after that kind of first kind of explosion of the blast of the incident, starting the dust starts to settle, then looking in particular within yourself, because like you say, it is happening for you. Like the either your body or the universe or both are like conspiring to try, and although it seems really traumatic and often really is, often they're really genuinely hard, horrible human traumas to work through, that there's this plan that's trying to take you through these journeys. Like your soul has chosen this path so that you're going to, if you hit these points where you really need to, like in some of our examples, like rebuild our egos or rediscover our self-value. And you mentioned about this aspect of like where do we get started with what we've achieved in our own value. And I think a fantastic place to start is what's unique about you. Like I'd call them superpowers. And it and to me it's a unique ability that you don't really need to like write it down in some sort of big flashy marketing speak. You just need to write down, I think I'm good at maybe having one-to-ones with people, or I'm good at connecting with people. Like, and it can seem like it doesn't matter that it's commercially viable or not. It doesn't matter that people perceive value in it or not. You have a whole load of these superpowers. I often found that I'd have, superpowers at building and nurturing brand new teams and helping them sail through or ride, it's probably a better word, ride like the first couple of years of just the hardest, when you're getting up and running and getting going, and having like, I, I found that really hard to articulate to others, but I loved it. I loved doing it because I felt so close to the people. I felt like I could nurture them and build them. And I found that so rewarding. And then the business side I loved as well, because you're going from scratch to something. And that I felt eventually in my last job, I started to articulate that as a superpower. I would say every 6 months in our reviews, I'd say I think one of my things I love doing is that. And then also combining technology and people, like, helping building technology that genuinely helps people, that helps their lives. And it doesn't matter what the rest of the world thinks of your superpowers. It's totally up to you to go on a journey to identify them and to see them in you. And if you're anything like me, it's a really hard journey to like, listen to those people that are telling you, Jon, I think you're really good at this thing. And like, am I? Like when I left my last company, and one of the directors said, you're really good at bringing fun to like really difficult, like often quite challenging meetings, whether you're just speaking and laughing, or you bring your guitar and you're singing at an event while we're all being too serious about the work we're doing. And it's like, that's what you remember me by after 8 years of building AI systems? Like, yes, that's the superpower. And it's like, well, there it is, is one way. It's one way of like getting those reflections from others. And then I think once you start to see in yourself how these can help, how you've been given these superpowers by whatever your belief systems are, like by your God, by source, or whatever it is, or by your soul, or whatever you believe. And so when you're in that situation, you identify them, you start to feel into them, say, oh, some of these you may enjoy more than others, some may bring more joy than others, and start to see in yourself, you know what? Maybe I am a perfectly unique human with these very unique gifts, and that somewhere there's a company, a job, or maybe I'll start my own business where they will be valued because I value them. I
Absolutely.
value them first. And therefore, if the company I go to doesn't value them, great, go and find other people that, either have different superpowers or don't care about their self-worth. I do. I care about my self-worth. I care so much that I'm going to turn up and negotiate with not quite high. You might perceive them as quite high non-negotiables, including working hours. And they might say, oh, you're not committed if you're only working 8 hours a day. And you say, that's fine. If you don't value that, I'm out. Because I work insanely hard in 8 hours. I'll work more than 3 people can do in 8 hours, but you don't even know that about me yet. So definitely
And
valuing
that's true,
yourself.
by the way. I'll vouch for that as well.
That's true. Yeah, it's scarily true. Um, and I think finally, the other aspect of, like, if you really want to, like, cultivate your self love and your self value, and valuing those superpowers that you have, those unique skills, you have to have strong boundaries, really strong. So just like we were talking about those salary negotiations, or when you've joined that company, so they've said yes to everything, and maybe they're a little bit, still hold a little bit of resentment about some of the things that you said. Several months in the job, and they're saying, "Okay, we need you to work till 6," and you're saying, "No, it's 5. I finish at 5. I was hard to work till 5 o'clock, and this is not going to be a pattern. This is a non-negotiable boundary for me, and I don't need to explain why. I have a family, but I'm not going to go into detail about what we do. I don't need to justify to you why
Mhm.
that's what I agree to, and you agree to it too." And they'll be thinking, I do not want this guy in the company. And you'll be thinking, if they push me, I'll just leave. And it has to be as brutal as that, because otherwise you'll just erode your value and say, well, that thing about, working hours, maybe it just comes down a little bit. It's not that important to me. And then, oh, well, maybe my superpowers, it's okay. I get to use 80% of them. And you gradually reduce all of these. I'm imagining this little bar chart in my head. And as you reduce those value, the ways that you identify your self value, you're doing it to yourself. Like, it's not just the difference between 5 and 6 p.m. It's the difference between how much you care about and respect and value yourself.
That is so true. And even if you did that exercise, I don't know if you remember when we first started working together, I always had 2 or 3 jobs going at the same time.
Mhm.
Always. So like I always worked in an office, I worked in a nightclub, and I worked in a pub sometimes as well. But luckily when I was working with you, I tried to get rid of all of that. But there was a stage where I was managing a jazz bar, and I was doing customer support out here as well. So I had those 2 jobs, and it got to a stage where I looked at the jazz bar that I was managing and the amount of hours that I was putting in, because I was being salaried, and I worked it out and I divided it by the hours that I was working, and I was getting paid like £1.30.
Wow.
Okay, this was 20 years ago. I'm showing my
But
age.
so maybe it's £2.60 now.
Maybe it's 2.69. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, what are you doing? Plus the responsibility. It was
Mhm.
so much easier for me to go in as casual staff, not worry about locking up, not worrying about, arranging people for the gigs, not worrying about, trying to get bands on, making sure that they're okay, like all of that responsibility. And I was like, oh my goodness, like that really put into perspective. So when you're saying that working that extra hour, working that extra 2 hours, working those extra 8 hours, and a lot of the times, like I've heard people saying, well, too bad you work those times, you need to manage your time properly. Meanwhile, you've given 2 or 3 months of work and not even being compensated, yet we're just like, okay, next year I won't do the same thing. But it's like you say, it's like putting in those boundaries. And a lot of the
Yeah.
times I've also had clients that have just shifted jobs, and it's like, now is your opportunity to, as a clean slate, to put in those boundaries, to put in
Yeah.
that kind of like, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm not, this is kind of like a hard kind of like stop. So it's very important, but it's us. It's us. It's all within us.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. I also, like, had this challenge with money when I first started my company in May, because I was like, what am I going to charge people? And and I knew that what I was charging felt lower. Like it felt because it just been a hobby for a few years before, and then and I did like the kind of traditional things of like looking around what other people charge, but the work was so different, and our clearly our superpower is very different, and also my confidence levels were much. I knew that they were much lower in this work, so I was just getting started.
Yeah.
And I remember speaking to a couple of coaches about it, which I don't know, like some some useful techniques. Like one was really interesting, which is I mean I did it a lot in business, but I never done it, never felt it by myself. Which was I would say, what is the highest ridiculous amount that I feel uncomfortable charging for a service, like maybe for an hour session, and then the lowest amount that I would resent doing it, and then find the midpoint. And
Okay.
that was a really funny exercise because I was like, this is all about feeling. Like, and
Yeah.
actually, it's about feeling of value. Why that's strange. And I realized that this is like business. This is how business works. This is shocking to me. It's taken me so many years of my life to realize that people just put numbers on products and then they see what happens. And why do they choose those numbers? Because I mean, they might have incredible AI models to try and work it all out. They might even constantly change the prices, every minute, or every second. But for me, it felt like a journey of actually just my self confidence and self value, and that gradually over time, I would, in part because I would be more confident, but also would add more value because I just get better and better at the job, that I would charge more. And then
Yeah.
I also felt a bit bad about, well, what about, you have these human reactions like, well, what about the people that can't afford it? And I just reacted to that by going, well, I'll also invest a certain amount of time each week and create free stuff so that everyone gets access to it. And always that feeling of, if you could afford nothing, if you could buy nothing from me, you could still massively progress in your in my case, like your spiritual development. Like you still do all these things or your meditation practice just like I did, but you wouldn't have to go off and buy those other things. And I felt like that feels like a good balance for me. But yeah, when you reverse the maths and you like work out, well, okay, especially starting your business, you often work many hours, or you're you're drawn into this. Like, I know that's one of my traps. Like my growth areas was like, in order, my old pattern was to just work more hours
Mhm.
because I could, even like while I was working, I couldn't question myself about the feeling of lack of self value. And so I would just do that. I would just like, oh, great, I'll just work all the time then. And then I'm always happy. And it's like, no, you're always denying it, Jon. And you're not taking time to go, okay, like, could you survive 2 hours off? Could you take 2 hours off this afternoon? Just do it. Like, your own
Yeah.
boss, like, and how would that feel? What if you worked less hours today? How would that feel? And so that's been a really beautiful journey as well. And yes, so much of it comes down to this cultivating of the and nurturing the self-love within you.
Yeah. One thing that you taught me was that you were like, I needed these amount of time of self-care, and this is what I'm doing, like radical self-care. I'm like, oh my goodness, you're even more radical than I am. This is awesome.
Yeah, you must do it.
You
Yeah,
must do
you're
it.
just
And you're
like
right. It's
go
it's a
ahead.
trap. It's a trap when we and I find myself in the same thing, especially if you're doing what you love.
Mhm.
We work all the time, but the other aspect of it is, like you say, it's a distraction. A lot of the times throw ourselves into work so that we don't have to deal with life,
Yeah.
right? And I found that during COVID as well, where people were nervous to be with themselves,
Hmm.
because then we have to do that internal work too, which becomes quite scary. But I love that yeah, what if we were just to take 2 hours today? And that's incredible. And I actually have this client of mine that has started working in a new job, and especially now that it's coming up to Christmas, things are a little bit like, it snows a lot in Canada, and they're just like, at 3 o'clock, they're like, just go home, get home before the snow, get home safe. And she was like, wait, what? Like, what's the catch? And she was
Yeah.
like, they were like, no, you can go get home before the roads get really, really bad. We just want you to be safe. Like, this work will still be here tomorrow.
Yeah.
And she was like, what? So I love that. And I'll see if I can invite them on to have a conversation with us.
That'd be lovely.
I
Yeah.
love companies that are bringing in that. And I think it's even a balance between masculine and feminine in the
Mhm.
nurturing, the caring, and the value of staff, as well as the processes. Let's get it done. Let's move it. How can we support you through that? So I think there's a lot of companies that are really starting to shift that and
Yeah.
value their people, which I still think is the most important part of a business.
Yeah. I only really picked up on this in the last few months, is that maybe I kind of knew it before, but for example, when I have many clients that say, "Oh, I want to, develop my psychic abilities. I want to talk to like spirits and spirit guides and stuff." And yet you can see them, and they're, even as they say it, they're a bit scared of saying it. And part of them wants to do it, and then part of them scared of doing it. And I realized that so much of this work, and it's true in really any company, is that if you can create safety, if people feel safe, if they feel safe to, and I don't just mean like I can like tell the manager I disagree. No, I mean like genuinely safe, where they feel like they can beautifully express all their superpowers, what's unique and funny and quirky about them, that they just feel like them, like they turn up to work and it's the whole them you see. They're not
Yeah.
hiding any part, and they're not sat there, hunched over, saying
Mhm.
yes to another thing they're unhappy with. The more you can open up their hearts and allow them to truly feel safe, everything's so much easier. And if you think about productivity increasing, it's like it's exponential. You know that magic when you suddenly get people together who they seem to like, as a team, they're working together well. They often have quite strong personal relationships as well, and they're just like on fire. Their productivity is an order of magnitude, and it's not like we'll just pack boxes at 1,000 miles an hour instead of 10 miles an hour. It's more like, why are we using boxes? That's silly. We've got much better ideas. Let's use water, or whatever they decide, and they invent so much better. And yeah, I feel that's definitely a key to being able to ride these different storms, to be able to focus on cultivating your value, because there's reasons why all this is good for everybody. And yeah, I love that the new paradigm, what I was just reflecting as you were talking, like, why are we doing this, Natasha? Why do we turn up to these podcasts and share our journeys and experiences? It's like we're trying to lead by example, right?
Yeah.
And lead without controlling everyone and saying you must do it these ways, but seeing that I hope that when people watch our podcast, they start to see the patterns within themselves, the reflections, and go, yeah, maybe that's something I need to explore. Like, do I really feel safe at work? Do,
Yeah.
do I feel like I'm the whole me at work? Do I feel that I'm okay to talk about my religion or spirituality? Like, or am I going to be like, attacked over these things? And when you're truly safe, you will outperform anything you've ever done in your life. Feels like, it feels like how I feel now. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I hope that I hope that our work is resonating with people.
Yeah, no, yeah, I hope for that too. And you're right, it's that authentic self. And what was coming to me as you were talking about that is we need to be authentically who we are in interviews as well,
Mhm.
because then we know. And I think that's going to be my word for next year, is try and step more into that authentic, releasing the masks. And I think that if we do that when we go for an interview, then we're able to be more ourselves as well, for those that do accept us for the way we
Yeah,
are in our superpowers too, right? So it's like, and I always look at it from kind of like the travel industry and shift work as well. It's like, how authentic would it be if you turn out and go, I'm not a night person. My
yeah,
brain is off
that's
on
right. Yeah,
night. Like, it really doesn't function.
yeah,
Like, yeah, we'll put you in the morning where you're most productive, most creative, most supportive, most happiest,
yeah,
right? And I think there's that recognizing what we need, what we want, what we desire, what are our superpowers. And a lot of the times, it's like you say, we find it where we enjoy it, where we are having fun, where time disappears, because then that's what we know we're good at.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's so true. I did find, to my shock, that in terms of being authentically me, that one of my most popular video formats, if you like, now on vlogging on YouTube, is either me walking with my dog, including stopping and picking up poo, but I don't stop the video. I just turn the camera to the side. Or even more shocking to me was just driving in my camper van. So I just drive for whatever. I've been driving to the hospital to see my dad, and then an hour's drive back. And the comments I get are just so beautiful. They're just people say, "Oh, it's like I'm sat there with you," and it's like, I know, and I just talked at you for like an hour. Thank you for joining me. And I remember I was like guided to create a video just about my working day. I thought it would be. I was literally, I think I called it like literally my probably my worst, most boring video, but people loved it. They were like, because I said I knew what I wanted a year ago. I would love to have known what my day would be like, because I just couldn't quite get my head around it, and some of the feelings about flexibility and prioritization and taking breaks and doing things differently. And it fascinated me that, what would that be like in this, if you could just do it all decide it all yourself. And yeah, I feel that I reach a level of authenticity when I'm just babbling away and I'm not a lot of structure. I just pick a theme and I just drive and I just keep my eye on the road the whole time and just talk. And no editing, no, all I do is remove the background sound with a little AI filter, and then that's it. It's like I just upload it. And so it's like I find such joy in, as you know, from these podcasts, and like zero editing, and yet all the values this. I always feel so good after connecting with you and our guests, and I always feel like so energized. Like, yes, this feels like the whole of me, and doing it the way that I find the most joy, and it's fun and fabulous and feels free.
Oh, I love that. I love your videos of you talking while you're driving and walking your dog as well. And I love all the other ones where you like jump into it's like so authentically you. I love it. I love it. Yeah, no, it's yeah, it's fantastic. I think we're slowly starting to trust and let go of the judgment, and just you exemplify that very, very well, Jon. Yeah, it's such a good
That's
way of
kind. Thank you.
it. Yeah. No, it's important. And yeah, for me, I've started to just trust that my foot in mouth, and sometimes I say things that, and then they always meant, I've started giving myself grace in the sense of it's always meant with love and compassion. There's never, and yeah, I think it's also part of being Sagittarian as well. I met somebody the other day who was like, "Am I just say the wrong thing?" And I was like, "When is their birthday? Are they born in end of November, beginning of December? When is it?" And they're like, "Yeah." I was like, "Okay, here we go." But it's that giving ourselves grace and allowance to be who we are in this world without fear of judgment, I think is
Yeah.
important.
And so much of it's about the energy behind it, right? Even if you say really bad words to someone and your energy is right, when you apologize immediately and you correct yourself, you realize that actually they lightly felt the energy, because our words are like the bandwidth of a word's like this, and then your energy is like just huge, right? And so one thing I catch myself saying is it's like a family joke. They're always laughing at me when years ago I said in a family game, it said it's like a board game. My son was trying to figure out. He was trying to guess something, and I said to him, "Guess harder." And I was like, and everyone like stopped and stared at me, and I was like, "Oh, not only does that not make any sense, it just seems really insulting, like a really
Yeah.
horrible thing to say to anyone." And then it surfaced again during massage class when a couple of weeks ago, when one of the class members was they're lying on their front, they're pushing their leg towards their body, like the heel towards their body against my hand, so that it would like make their calf muscle like push out more.
Yeah.
And they were doing it really gently, and it just said push harder. And it was almost like the whole class stopped for a moment, about 15 people, and then he'll start laughing at me. And I was like, I just said, and I was like, it was the energy, wasn't it? It was like, I just got lazy with the words and with the energy, and it was very funny. And yeah, it sometimes when you recall these stories to other people, because the energy is not there, or you find it hard to connect with, they don't get it, right? It's like, what do you mean you said they had small feet? Like, what's the problem with that?
Yeah.
But the reality is, it's like the context and the energy behind it. And yeah, I absolutely agree. Like, just holding space yourself and having a good laugh at yourself, and sometimes sharing the stories helps encourage others, right? Because it's like, yeah, I do that all the time.
Absolutely. No, these definitely fuel me. They fill my heart and they give me yeah, throughout the week it just gives me energy to keep going, keep doing. Yeah, we've had some wonderful guests and open to more wonderful guests as well. And I love that both of us have foot and mouth disease, so we've always have stories to tell, which is
That's right.
awesome.
Very true.
Shall we meditate?
Yeah, that would be
I
fun.
think it's my turn.
That's right. It is.
Yes. Okay. Let's see where this meditation takes us.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Okay, let's close our eyes. Let's take a couple of deep breaths. Breathing in through our nose and out through our mouth. To imagine when we're breathing in, that we're breathing in light. And when we exhale, we release the tension, the stress, any low vibrational frequencies that we might be holding on to within our bodies. Allowing our breath to be a cleansing agent, breathing in light and exhaling all that no longer serves. Let's set the intention that every time we breathe, this process will continue throughout our day, releasing and igniting the inner light that we already hold. Now, I'm going to bring our attention to the soles of our feet. And I'm going to invite you to open up the energy centers in the soles of our feet and connect into the energy of Mother Earth. Feel that exchange of energy. Absorb Mother Earth's energy up into your body, allowing it to replenish, to replace, to recharge all aspects of our body. And as we start to feel this balance of energy, this groundedness, I'm going to invite you to connect into the crystalline energy, this diamond white energy at the center of the earth. And I'm going to invite you to bring that energy up from the center of the earth, up through the soles of our feet, and anchor that energy into our heart space, completely grounding us, completely connecting us to the energy of an ascended earth, a timeline where we work together, a timeline where this collaboration, this exchange of energy between our physical worlds and as this energy moves through us, as this energy continues to replenish, replace, enrich every single cell within our physical form, we start to connect in to the golden energy of the central sun. This energy brings with it the vibrational frequency of unconditional love, radical self-acceptance, compassion, and expansion. Call forward that energy and allow it to move through the layers of the atmosphere, connecting in to the top of our head, filtering down into our brains, all the way down our spine, into our nervous system, and anchoring into the heart space, allowing both energies to merge, to connect within our hearts. Allow both energies to move through our physical, our etheric, our mental and emotional bodies, bringing in this complete harmony, this complete connection between heaven and earth, physical and spiritual. And I'm going to invite you to bring your energy, your focus into this heart space. And in your heart, you'll notice that there is a secret chamber. There is a doorway that leads you into a space where you can see the authentic, beautiful divine energy that you already are. And I'm going to invite you to open this door and step over the threshold into another time, into another place that will show you the essence that you already are, that divine spark. And as we view this, we start to realize that we really are an aspect of the one experiencing itself through this filter of physicality. And as we sit in this space with this complete essence of who we are, feel into the gifts that we bring into this world, into this reality, to help us experience this world through this avatar that is our body. What is the essence that we bring into this reality? Ask the question, what are the superpowers that you've brought into this reality? And allow the memories, allow the reflection on your life where you've stood into those superpowers and expressed them. And then ask to show you how can you continue to express them every day. With everyone in any moment. Can you feel the joy moving through your body? The excitement, the love, the compassion. Can you see the true value that you already are? And as you continue to see these, write these down. Anchor them into your psyche, into your memory, so that they are the forefront of who you are. So that they are the forefront of your mind, so that you can move throughout your day, expressing your true self, without worry, without judgment, with confidence, with compassion, and with love. Remember who you are, because this is your essence. And as we start making our way back through the doorway, almost as if walking through a veil, allow that veil to leave behind the unworthiness, the stories we tell ourselves. Allow it to be a filter that transmutes the low self-esteem, the stories, only allowing value, love, radical self-acceptance as we step over through that veil into the here and now, where we walk every day, where we talk our worth, our value, where we be completely ourselves, authentically who we are, without fear, only love. Coming back into this body, into the here and now, knowing that we've done good work here today and that we are different. We are uniquely who we are in this world, expressing our superpowers, expressing the uniqueness that we are in this world, because that is the only version of ourselves that we can be in order to fit in with the rest of the pieces of the puzzle. Uniquely ourselves, all working together, playing our part, always. Take a deep breath and exhale. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Write down those superpowers if they came to you before you forget them. Anchor them onto a piece of paper. I would recommend.
Wow. Thank you. A few tears in my eyes, happy tears. Thank you so much, Natasha. What a beautiful, beautiful meditation. Just I feel like you had me at connecting with the white diamond crystal energy at the center of the earth. I was like, this is just feels amazing. And I definitely felt like I just spent a beautiful time with my soul. So thank you for that gift.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Oh,
Well,
thank you for this, Jon.
thank you. Thank you for another incredible podcast. And yeah, we'll bring our recording to an end. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Please do check out both Natasha and our websites. And if you're interested in becoming a guest, there are details in the description of the video, or visit the About page on my website, jonbinnie.com, and you can submit your information. And we'd love to have you on and learn all about your experiences. So thank you, everyone, and we will end at that. Take care. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.